Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce Ventouras, and with me is Lukas Ventouras, who is running for Congress in New York's first district, which looks like much of Long Island when I Google searched it.
Yeah.
And we are going to get to know each other, Lukas. You responded to a letter I sent you yesterday describing our main issue, purpose, problem that we are in the business of exposing. We want to
Right.
find and excite candidates such as you to comprehend it, embrace it, get convinced about it, and consider running on it or doing what you will with this opportunity, because it's a big problem
Right.
we think your constituents and really all Americans could and should get behind. So I want to get to know you, your candidacy, why you're running, et
Sure.
cetera. And then I want to answer all your questions about this issue, this problem, so that you get to know us really, really well. We get to know you really, really well.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. Thank you again.
So why'd you throw your hat in the ring? What do you want to do for your district? Things like that.
I'm born and raised out on Long Island. The district is, like you said, it's not most of Long Island. I would say it's most of Suffolk County, and culturally, it's a very unique place. It's a very blue collar place. A place where people respect hard work and they respect their neighbor. It's diverse, both ethnically, religiously, ideologically, and so on and so forth. So it is just one of those places that I like to say it's like kind of like a microcosm of all of America in one place. And I'm very blessed to be from a place like that, because I think it makes you a well-rounded person. To have different kinds of neighbors, who have different kinds of thoughts, and it's not just a homogenous place, on ideology or one thing or another. I'm product of immigrants as well, and that's a big part of the district. A lot of immigrants. So, yeah, the district is important to me, but I never really fancied myself as a politician. I'm finishing up law school right now at St. John's in Queens, and I had always wanted to be, a lawyer, an author, or something like that. At one point, I had wanted to work in the UN, and then I went to NYU looking to do journalism, broadcast journalism. I thought, maybe I could be a talking head or something like that. But I think the more I got into learning about the industry, the more I felt like I would be a bit stifled and I wouldn't be able to be truthful necessarily always. I would be serving someone's bottom line at the end of the day, like, a corporation. And I wanted to be able to do something where I could be transparent and helpful and actually, if I uncovered the truth about something, actually be able to tackle it in a true and honest manner. But I still didn't think politics was anything on my radar at that point. I was like, okay, I'll go into law. I work in a civil rights firm in Hempstead, which is in Nassau County. I just want to help people that way. Like I said, I'm a product of immigrants. My dad's an immigrant and my mom's parents are immigrants, all from Greece. And I was very much raised on like, sometimes you might have to lean on someone. And so if someone leans on you, you help that person. And I think, my mom's a therapist and that sort of manifested itself into me being like, I want to help people in some way. But, I've always been a political junkie at the same time, been a big history nerd. I ended up majoring in history, uh, American political history. And so at some point around 2020, I think I started getting involved with my local party out on Long Island. There's a lot of great people out here, but I just felt like I was seeing the candidates we were putting up time after time, and I felt like, they're frankly getting blown out in a place that is a lot more 50-50 than people give it credit for. I think people, because of the last 10 years, think, oh, this is like a MAGA or a very Republican district. It's not, but the turnout has been just pretty poor for Democrats.
And you're running as a
Um,
Democrat, right?
yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
in the first district. And yeah, I just felt that the elections were not going our way, and the candidates who I thought were all great people, they weren't hitting a tone. They like their campaign didn't have a theme that was connecting with people, and they were, I think, consistently being painted as the more out of touch candidate of the two, specifically in the congressional elections. And I felt like, we needed a candidate that was more willing to, push the envelope against corruption and, insider trading. And that was more maybe ear to the ground and was understanding what the mood was. Because the mood in most of the country, and definitely, in Suffolk County, is very much sick of the status quo. And I think that the Democrats were, to a fault, using an old playbook, trying to paint themselves as this steady hand, a middle manager type of thing. And it really wasn't resonating with people, and we had some candidates that weren't from the area as well. And people from Long Island, like, they love a person from Long Island that goes and represents them. Like, like they don't want to see someone from the city and come in and say, who they are. It's a very culturally, it's a distinctive place. It's very different than the city, obviously. And so at one point, I just felt like, I feel like we need candidates who are talking about corruption. They're talking about issues like, expanding the social safety net, um, rooting out corruption in terms of, some of the stuff you're talking about, like small business things. Some of it was, we need to ensure, maybe a child tax credit, paid leave, paid, sick leave, maternal, paternal leave, just parental leave in general, things that make life easier for people and also for businesses that don't have to spend so much money guaranteeing maybe necessarily healthcare to people, stuff like
Mhm.
that. If the government steps in and helps to a certain degree, it also takes the pressure off of a lot of small business owners. I would know because my family, my grandparents are immigrants. They had a number of small businesses in the city and elsewhere. So I definitely understand like the pressures of trying to be an entrepreneur in this country, but with like a service, not just moving money around. Like people who
Hmm.
they want to have a business that they want to have a main street shop. Where I'm from, there's a very distinctive main street where you've seen over time. You know, During good times, people have been allowed to expand what they're able to do. It's I'm having this artistic artisanal shop and I'm going to sell, candles and whatever. And, when times are good and consumers are empowered and businesses are being able to empower not only themselves, but the people who work for them, then stuff like that can flourish. When times are bad, you see, those storefronts will get bought up by like a Starbucks or something like that, that can easily, just plug and play and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
so these are a lot of themes that I didn't feel like were being talked about. It was a lot of like, we have to protect democracy, which I think is very important, but I think maybe Democrats were being seen as the status quo in a world where, they didn't want the status quo to maybe become Trump, right? But they were maybe accidentally painting themselves as the people who won't change during a time when people really want to change. And part of that change was they just want candidates who are like transparent, who are a little bit more blunt, and who are going to say sometimes the quiet part out loud, and who are going to say, I'm actually going to fight for you and stuff like that. And I just wasn't seeing that, and so I decided, I'm sort of just one of those people that's like, if no one's doing it, I'll do it.
When did you declare your candidacy?
In the fall,
Nice.
right around the time that the election was over, because I just felt,
You can't
I
start.
was here.
You can't start too early. As a student of
Yeah,
American history,
right,
maybe you learned a little bit about John F. Kennedy. I too am a student of American
right.
history. You can't start early enough. And
Yeah, no,
on your website, what's delightful is that you are as smart and articulate as you seem by the content on your website. So
thank you. I appreciate
that's
that.
just fantastic. And you've well organized your platform around three, unless I missed another page,
Hmm.
basic major themes, which is worker empowerment, end corruption, and
Hmm.
lower the cost of healthcare.
Well,
Side
I do have
where
another
what's
issues
what?
page.
I'll
I do have an
okay,
issues page with probably
okay.
like around 8 or 9 other sections. But yeah, those are my
Oh,
three
good.
main like themes.
And you know what's nice is when you click on just these three main ones, that opens up a page where it's really thorough. So
Thank you.
it's clear like, okay, this very young looking man on the website who's in law school, wow, this is comprehensive. I would have to really do my homework to talk to you about everything that you have on just those three issue
Right,
pages. So kudos
right.
to you. And your
Thank you.
website again is what's the URL?
It's a Wix site because we're just saving money right now.
Where is it?
AMH1234 WIXSITE.com/Ventouras, VENTOURAS, number four, Congress.
And with the first donations you get, invest in a better URL.
Yes, no, I definitely, I'm actually working on that right now.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. And
Yeah,
kudos to you to getting started. Things don't have to be perfect. They just have to get
no,
started. the content really does speak for itself. A little bit more about worker empowerment. That looked like front and center. Why? And what do you want to do in that world?
Generally speaking, I'm very much in favor of union empowerment. I think it's very important. I've never been in a union. My family has run like personal businesses. It's been restaurants or, donut shops, diners, things like that, that Greeks do when they come to this country. But I have very much learned over time the importance of, collective bargaining and being able to come together as a coalition to say, we deserve better and we won't be, put under the thumb of oppression of like a big business or something like that. And being a student of history as I am, there have been moments that have, shown me the importance of making sure that workers have the ability to empower themselves. Um, and I think right now is a good example of that. We're having what seems like a very oligarchic moment, where I think the rights of workers is very important. And I think in the context of this district has a lot of NYPD, FDNY, a lot of people who are unionized, lots of, you know, even, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, I have, family friends that are the most pro-Trump that you could possibly be, but, don't touch their union because,
Right.
they'll go down swinging. You know what I mean? And it's very
Yeah.
important. I think that people try and make it like a very ideological thing, and it's not. I think
No,
across
not
the
not when
board.
you can teach how practical it is
Yeah, and
along
I
the
think this
lines
is,
you just described.
yeah,
Does your
yeah.
is you are you getting a law degree in anything that particularly helps you in workers' rights?
So my concentration is constitutional law, and I'm doing civil rights law. So,
Perfect.
yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
That's what I want in a legislator.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was important to me once I realized this was the path I wanted to go and I wanted to go to law school that, for instance, I took an immigration law class. I've taken an international business transactions law class actually this
Right.
past semester, which was, as you might expect, a complete um like crap
Sir,
show. Just
yeah,
like
I
it's
would imagine.
circus. Just like every day my professor's coming in and saying, well, the thing I taught you yesterday and last, Monday actually doesn't apply anymore. It's something else now, and it's just like up and down and up and down. And I think what have they been calling Trump taco? I think, Trump always chickens out because, it's just a psychotic way of doing trade. And that's why I
Uh,
wanted to take the class. I've taken certain classes that have
right.
been policy oriented. I took a healthcare class as well this past semester. And
Do you have a primary between now and the general election?
so right now there's no one in the primary. I don't believe there will be. Because A, because I'm trying to coalesce support, and B, because, you always hear rumblings from people and it doesn't seem like anyone's going to jump in. Especially because I don't think the Democratic Party, as in the DCCC, is targeting the seat, which I think is wrong because I think it's a flippable district.
Do you have to secure the Democrat Party's approval as a candidate?
So I think that's sort of a point of contention because a lot of people will want you to go through certain committees and things like that. But as long as you get, the certain amount of signatures, I don't think it's very many. I think it's 1,200, something
When
like that.
to be on
You
the
can get on the
ballot?
ballot. Yeah, you
Ah,
can get on the ballot regardless.
what's the deadline to get on the ballot? Okay.
Next, I would say spring because they haven't even
All right.
scheduled the primary yet.
Right. Right. Do you have a mentor in politics, someone perhaps who has successfully won such an office?
I would say a political mentor. I wouldn't say that he's not in politics. This is a historian that I'm good friends with, Harvey K. He's an FDR historian.
Would I know him? Has he
He's
written books?
yeah, he's written many books.
K A
Harvey, yeah.
Y or Kaye?
Kaye.
Okay, because I'm a big reader, especially about
Yeah.
history and presidents, and so
Yeah, and
on
FDR
your
is my favorite. Yeah.
oh yeah, why? Let's have fun with this. Why?
Sure.
Why is he your favorite?
Well, I think with any president, there are major caveats. There just really hasn't been any president where you could say that they have just a completely clean slate and everything they did is just holy and good. So, I do sometimes, every president has those demons, right? But I think with him, the good really outweighed anything that you could say.
Well, what did you admire about him? What do you admire about
I just really admired that he was able to empower the working class. He really had a vision, I think, which was the best thing about him. There have been a lot of presidents who have been able to implement great things. I think he's implemented the greatest things, but I think the best thing about him was that he had a clear vision
him?
and he really never deviated from that. Like you have a lot of politicians that they say I'm going to do this, and that, and it's not always really even this clear vision that they have. They just say, haphazardly, "Oh, I'll do this, and that," right? And then
Right.
they get in office, and there's a million excuses, right? That's the modern politician that we know. That's sort of the thing that invigorated me to want to run and be different, right? But with FDR, you really see someone who, he said something, he did it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he really conquered Rome. You know what I mean? Like he really did it. He
Yeah.
did everything he set out to do. And the things that he wasn't able to do, people might say he overreached with trying to pack the core or things like that. That's definitely a debatable issue.
Right.
He did everything he said he wanted to do, and he went to every means necessary to do the things that he wanted to do. And I think that we
Yeah.
have so many politicians that chicken out when, it gets tough because they have an excuse not to do something. He
Absolutely.
just was, he just plowed ahead. And
Well,
I really admire that.
that explains why he was somewhat of a hero to John F. Kennedy,
Yeah, exactly.
who worshipped courage above all things. Couple more
Right.
questions along these lines, and then I do want to swing it over to talking about this massive problem issue that I'd like to equip you with to consider, look into, get confirmed, and then see like what would happen if you ran with that. But
Right.
briefly, Lucas, if you had to capture a 60-second soundbite, and the more you get interviewed, the more you will lead from the first question with the major reasons to vote for you or to go to your
Right.
website. Because in sales and marketing, you want to quickly tell people what to do. And if I were a candidate, I would quickly say, go to my website to find, and then boom, boom, boom. And then when they go to your website, it has to be the first screen has to be those things. Now you're
Right.
integrating all your media and all your marketing, and you have a year and a half to perfect this so it's razor sharp, so that any contact with you, from a meme to a tweet to an interview, pushes people on a slippery water slide where they go to your website, they see this, and it's irresistible.
Right.
Do this, that, and the other thing, learn, get
Yeah, you hook them
convinced,
in.
and then have a house
Right.
party where you introduce people to
Right.
Lucas.
Right.
You know, what? So, in that spirit, to all of your district, vote for Lucas, because when he gets to Congress, the top three things that he's going to do in just 2 years to improve your life, what are they?
I think the first thing I would do is introduce legislation to stop insider trading. Um, uh, I think that's very important. It takes a lot of the incentives for people to want to go into Congress to make money out. So that's one thing. Another thing I would do would be and again, the caveat is that if I win, Trump is still president. So these are the things I would attempt to do, because I think I do very much believe in not making promises. You can promise to try very hard to do something, but I don't think that you can promise someone that I'll do this because I will be one of,
Uh,
435, right?
this is why you're also going to be a great attorney. Good, continue.
I
Truly,
appreciate that. No, I
truly.
appreciate that. But one thing I would definitely want to do is do a joint bill of a child tax credit and paid parental leave, sick leave. I think that just empowering people to be able to have a family and empower them to, grow in that sense. Because when a person is philosophically and emotionally full and happy, they can also do great things in other ways. And when they feel limited in the ways that they, can grow potentially, it has a backlash. So I think it's very important to empower people to be sick, take time off, heal, be healthy. I've seen my mother works for herself, but I've seen her, she has a chronic migraine issues, where it's truly debilitating, but she has to make money, so she goes to work sick all the time, like with blinding pain. And so for me, it's very empowering to be like, for her, it's tough because you're self-employed, right? But I've seen that play out with other people who just sick and they
Okay.
have to go to work, friends of
All right.
mine, things like so that's important to
Those
me,
are a couple things. Give me one more
yeah, those
thing.
are two things.
All
One
right.
more thing I would also say is expanding Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I think raising the cap to be able to fund it more is very important. Having people just pay just a little bit more in to
Mhm.
benefit. I do really believe in that social contract where, like, you know what I mean? Like, we
Right.
all need to give in to have everybody prosper as a country. So that would be the third thing that I would definitely,
Well,
in
thank
perfect
you.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
And I would advise if you're not already doing this between now and election day, you might experiment with imagining that the main thing you are is a student of your district,
you.
so that if you're always getting to know your constituents, you can schedule interviews and then on the weekends blast out nice paragraph updates of what you've learned, but you'll always have something to talk about. Every interview, if you tell the story of the person you just met yesterday on the corner of Wickham and Maine, and their biggest problem in life is that pothole that they cannot get fixed. If for the next year and a half, your district hears them coming out of your mouth, it's just going to be a no
Right.
brainer. Like, who am I going to vote for? Who knows
Yeah.
me better than Lucas?
Yeah. Could
Nobody.
be very empowering. Right. Yeah.
That's
No.
a tactic Uncle Bruce throws at you for free. Um,
I'll definitely, I like that. I definitely like
and
that.
then, as much as you want to talk about, political success in America, like off screen, because I have just studied a few of my heroes. For instance, FDR. One of the greatest things I love about him, and then I'll get into my issue,
Mhm.
is the ASBL, is
Right.
his policies building on and supplementing and augmenting the Alexander Hamilton's American system of economics. Are you familiar with that?
To some extent. Yeah. Not fully.
Well, I'm going to email you and remind me, Bruce, send me that information.
Hmm.
Like John Quincy Adams, Abraham Lincoln, McKinley, Harding, FDR, and John F. Kennedy. This was the economics, the political economy for the nationalists who wanted to build a nice, strong America. And they were always opposed by the imperialists. In the American Revolution, these were the Tories who wanted Britain to win. And the Southern oligarchy that led to the Civil War were the Southern politicians and big landowners who were still working for the empire's tyrannical, oppressive, slave based economy of colonialism.
Right.
And that battle has raged up until today. Britain called it free trade. Oh, I want free. That sounds fair. It's anything but fair. It's
Right.
where they hoard manufacturing capability and exploit the natural resources of the countries they could conquer, which is what they wanted to do to the United States. They wanted to keep the United States, and they got back the United States by bribing and grooming traders to now we call it globalization. But Lincoln and FDR and Kennedy wanted to empower and maintain and keep and grow our own domestic economy, manufacturing, and commerce so that we could buy and sell among each other's. And what's grown or made in different parts can be well connected by bridges, railroads, and tunnels, and everything else. And trade with the rest of the world is kind of a bonus. But more than that, unlike the imperialists, these nationalists, Lincoln, how he empowered Russia, what Kennedy was doing with the newly free, independent nations released from colonial control after World War II. The best of Americans with this system, Lucas, wanted all this technology pushed out to all the nations of the world so that all the nations of the world could blossom and thrive with freedom, independence, and domestic economic power and strength and wealth so that no empirical empire tyranny dynasty could subjugate them. And the
Right.
battle is still raging. And by many measures, the West is being cannibalized by these same exploitive. It's the worst of capitalism. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's why I love FDR. And uh, let's get to my business at hand, or I'll let you comment or ask a question or two about that if anything occurs to you.
Well, I would say initially I was going to say that I actually wrote my thesis on midterm elections way before I knew I'd ever run in a midterm election because of things like that, because I wanted to find those points in American history where the ideology overrode like the overwhelming public sentiment, good or bad, what the mood was. And that, one of those times was with FDR. So that was one thing. And the other thing I was going to say was what you're saying reminded me of actually really why I like Martin Luther King Jr. Yes, for all the reasons why people know and love and understand why we revere him. But I think what a lot of people get wrong about why he was so important and influential was that he was, when he died, he was very focused on like a very class-based um, message, right? And he was talking very much about, how it's not there are issues of racism, but it's also the issues of like the haves and the have-nots and the oppressors and the oppressed. And the oppressed can be, and are, white people from West Virginia and it's black people that live anywhere in the country, especially at that time. And I think it's very important that people that know and understand why we revere him understand that was like his message. And
Yep.
that's why like I've studied him and I've really come to understand that because as a kid I'm like my
No,
mom
very,
talks about
very
him, I'm
few,
like I love MLK, yeah, but the
but
more I
no.
learned about him the more I'm like he was so ahead of his time
Right.
in so many ways.
And you have to read a book to learn that about it because the
Right.
mainstream is so busy struggling to make ends meet. All we know is the generic stuff from school and from prognostications from elected officials in the media. They don't know that the last year of his life really was all about, wow, it's this economic nonsense.
Yeah.
You know,
And Vietnam.
1 year to the day after his Riverside Church speech, where he condemned the United States as the biggest oppressor, if not murderer, on the planet, and the conversations between his people and Robert Kennedy, Senator Kennedy's at the time, there was even floating among them the idea of a 1968 ticket of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King for president and vice
I didn't know
president.
that. Yeah.
Like barely mentioned in their circles. It's not well documented, but
Right.
that's the
That's
kind of
interesting.
that's the kind of hope and opportunity that was maybe near our fingertips in 68. Let me
Oh yeah.
briefly review the letter that I sent you so people hear it. And let me get your thoughts about it, and then we can wrap it up. I'm not in a rush, but I just want to be
Me neither.
I want to stay on topic and agenda here, which is we brought to your attention a scandal, which most people don't know about.
Right.
And from big to little, it goes like this: 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses with less than 500 employees. 98% have less than 100. That's what we consider a legitimate small business.
Right.
Okay. 98% of all businesses in America have less than 100. The federal government, by law, is required to steer 23% of all federal contracts, which is about $345 billion worth of business, to small businesses. And every year, the government, through the SBA, the Small Business Administration, monitors
Right.
this and is responsible for it. Every year, they say, we met the goal, we exceeded the goal. This year was 25% or 26%. How about those loans we give out? Let's talk about the loans we can give you. We have found in 35 years of legal victories, multiple congressional investigations, and reports from the SBA's own Office of Inspector General, Lucas, that through fraud, loopholes, bad policy, and lax oversight, in reality, our small businesses get about 3% of all those federal contracts. And the huge majority of them, up to 97%, go to the 1/10 of 1% of businesses that are
Right.
huge businesses. It's an outrage. The SBA is participating in a lie, a falsehood,
Right.
and try as we might, we no longer can get on the big media that we used to 20 years ago. Our founder, Lloyd Chapman, used to be all over CNN, Fox News. He'd issue a press release, and the next day he'd be invited on CNN, C-SPAN. And around 2013, Our phone stopped working, our email stopped working, or excuse me, at least we stopped getting the phone calls and the response that we used to. And now it's an uphill struggle
Right.
again. So we wrote you, as we are writing, all the Democrat candidates for next year we can find, all the
Hmm.
Republican candidates we can find, because small businesses, 98, 99% of all businesses in America, it's not partisan. Everyone,
Yeah.
our entire thriving communities rely on the small businesses. And it's what you're talking about in the context of worker empowerment to excite you to get convinced about this and road test it. Start testing it on the campaign trail and see if nobody cares. See if it creates a firestorm of interest. See if in the next year you feel momentum in your district because they want to throw you at Washington to take care of this, that, and cleaning up this contracting scam. That's what we want to entice you to do.
Hmm.
Any questions?
Yeah, no, I definitely have questions. I think I'm interested in that in your premise because well, I know for instance people that, are current like boogeymen, people, like Elon Musk, right? I read somewhere that he gets about $8 million a day in government contracts, which is taxpayer money, and I think that's completely outrageous. People like him have their entire fortunes built off of the backs of our taxpayer money in contracts that frankly they don't deserve, in my opinion. And so yeah, no, I'm very no, I'm interested in that premise. I think that's outrageous. Who's the administrator now? Kelly Loeffler? I mean,
Exactly.
she's not. Yeah, I mean that's like, I mean, that's literally Wall Street personified. So it's ridiculous. That I think that more. I think, now that you tell me about it, the more I look into it, I think that more people don't talk about it is strange. Because it seems, frankly, like you said, nonpartisan, and because it's not partisan, because every administration flip back and forth, red or blue, this has been an issue. I take it. So,
Well, it's been a reality. It hasn't been an issue because
right,
if you Google search this or do a news search for it, you're going to find, like I said before, the official story, which is a lie. Oh, we meet the goal. No, we give plenty. We give that amount of contracts to small businesses. You have to get into the documentation. In the email I sent you, I sent
hmm,
about six sources at the bottom.
right,
Take the time to look into all that. When you need more, call me, write me. I encourage you also to take a day and search through our website because we have voluminous links. It's just not so well organized. I'm in the process of trying to organize that better. But if anyone, spent just, one day on our website looking at these claims, you'll see, oh my God, this is true. And we suspect that if, you could inflame your district to say, by golly, we really need those contracts coming our way. Hand in glove with it, I'll give you a heads up, is when you go to the SBA's website, sba.gov, when you start clicking in about, oh, okay, how do I get a federal contract? I instantly or very quickly get lost in click after click after click to pages and
right,
pages and outside websites. And I've completely lost the trail of how do I find out what contracts are available so I know if my business supplies those things? And
right,
how do I apply for a federal contract? It just seems to be all smoke and mirrors. They don't want you to know because the giant
right,
corporations that for 50, 60, 70 years that get almost 100% of the federal contracts, they got it all locked up. They don't want you to know. Go away.
yeah,
Go read about the loans. Take a loan, get into debt. You know,
right,
simple as
yeah.
that, it seems.
It's outrageous. Like I said, my family had small businesses. It wasn't anything that you would ever need to contract personally, and unless they wanted to open, a diner somewhere, in the Pentagon or something like that. But you know what I mean? Like, they could, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, if my grandfather, grandmother's dream wasn't to feed people, it could have been to, you know, uh, clothe people. It could have been to do whatever. And so, there could have been that crosshair where, it could have gone into government,
Absolutely.
and then that would have been, it could affect anyone, quite frankly. And I know
And
in
there's,
this district, there's a lot of small businesses.
yes. And here's other context. The federal government, the United States federal government, is the world's biggest purchaser of goods and services. All right. So it doesn't have to be the high tech stuff that a big company is the only capable provider. What if it's office equipment? What if it's office supplies? What if it's computer equipment? Like you just alluded to, clothing. What if it's uniforms? There's tons of things that could be contracted out to small businesses. Here's the other beautiful thing, and this is in my letter, blah, 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 but I want to get it on record again in yet another podcast. It's the fact that for every 1% increase in contracts to small businesses, 100,000 new jobs get created because the
Right.
contracts that go to the big businesses, those are big businesses. They don't create one new job to perform the work of those contracts. But if you poured $345 billion a year into our small businesses, they would have to create about 2.3
Right.
million new jobs. And then that gives work and more business to all the communities that serve all those new employees and hopefully families that are sprouting out, et cetera, et cetera. It's at our
Right.
fingertips. So we say that President Trump and Republicans are anti small business. Lucas, I got to make another point, which could make the difference in the election for you. Okay, elections are many times they're won by a difference of 1 or 2 percentage points in votes. Gives you,
Yeah.
unless you're in a very Republican or a very Democrat district. But all things being equal, okay, women are half the population. They own 42% of all businesses. But the federal requirement is that only 5% of federal contracts needs to go to women-owned businesses. If you start teaching this, we have a project called Don't Cheat Women that makes this point. If that requirement got raised, let's say to 25%, and if the overall goal got raised from 23 to 30 or 40%, all of a sudden that represents 5, 6, 7 million new jobs created without one extra penny being spent, except in the investigations, prosecutions, trials, and incarcerations of anyone who
Right.
stands in the way of
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
It's really an economic revolution. And
Yeah.
I'll end with this because in my heart of hearts, I often think about when you look at all the upside and you look at the trillions of dollars over the last 10 or 20 years that have not gone to small businesses that could have, and the millions of jobs that would have been created, and the economic prosperity. Maybe your mother wouldn't have had to work. Who knows? I
Right.
consider my analogy is it's like the civil rights movement. This is a small business rights kind of movement. That's how I
Right.
submit to you to.
It's a possibility to empower so many people and jobs and lives and create so much money. Yeah, no,
Yeah, you
it's
could, and you could fill a room with Republicans and Democrats who get excited to learn more about this. And what do I have to do? Simple.
right.
Harass your representatives. Harass them.
Well, I think you could harass them, or you could get people in office that are already, you know, yeah, exactly. They're already prone to believing in that, or being interested in that message. I also like the way you guys just, you said, here's a letter, get back to me. Let's talk about it. Like I like that. That's kind of politics I like engaging in, is just talking to people. I really like meeting people, learning, about people's stories and, what they're interested in. I just think that it's a very old school style of politics that I like, that I wish that we could bring back. Um, and so,
Well,
yeah, no, so I
you'll
appreciate it.
attract many of the people who are turned off from politics because it has become a clown act. What you just described was maturity and
Right.
effectiveness, speaking as an adult to adults. Unlike me, sometimes who gets loud and animated because, whatever I do. But I really appreciate your candidacy. I'm available
Thank you.
anytime. Write or call
I
me anytime
appreciate
with
it.
any kind of questions. What
Me
last
too.
thoughts or questions or points might you have?
I think just touching on, what we spoke about, waking people up to it being, very much a top 1% versus, the bottom, however many of us, that is truly, they want to pit us against each other. They want to make it about immigrants, or people's sexuality, or their, how they identify, all of these things that, I personally think that each unique thing about us is what makes humanity so special, is that we're all different in different ways. So for me, to have us pitted against each other for our uniqueness when it could be against people that are trying to like subjugate us financially and otherwise. I think it's a real tragedy. And I think that we need to really wake people up to it being like we need to link arms, all of us, and fight the people who are trying to make us hate each other and suffer financially. And I think it's,
And
I think it's important.
well, it absolutely is. And you can leverage what you know about American history as you continue to learn about American history, because I'm old enough to remember when there used to be a distinction made between your private life and your public life. There's a whole realm of stuff that's my business and that's your business. And
Right.
like you just described, that's been dragged into the public sphere because if we're arguing and afraid of each other and persecuting each other for these personal things, we've completely been distracted from the economics that's really, really hurting us. And
Right.
that's where the proper distinction between the personal and the private really frees us, because then it frees us to be free in doing whatever we want in our personal lives and
Right.
not
Exactly.
imposing anything inappropriately on anybody else in the public sphere. Because by definition, if you're imposing something on me, you're encroaching on my freedom. And those are
Right.
core American concepts that need to be rediscussed and re-understood and really retaught, because there's many
Right.
generations now that are clueless because of the horrible quality of the public school experience. That's worthy of a whole. We're not going to have that conversation right now.
Uh,
We got to kind of wrap
I
this
could
up.
have that conversation, but we won't right now.
Well, I saw that on other things that are on your website. So tell us your website once again, please.
It's amh123.wixsite.com/Ventouras, Ventouras, for the number four, Congress.
Thank you. And I'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. I wish you a great
Yeah.
afternoon.
Thank you too. I appreciate you having me.
Likewise. And now I'm going to hang on while I sign off here. I want to just thank everybody for watching and listening.